Welcome back to FastFreddyRC, and today I want to talk about tools. In recent months, I've had a number of questions and comments come up around the right tools for building Tamiya kits. As such, I thought I would do a video about them, because honestly, these questions have ended up taking me on a trip down memory lane. Why? Because the tools I use today are so different from the tools I used to build my Tamiya kit as a 15-year-old kid. In fact, I'm going to show you the exact tools that I used back then, as I still have them, and then I'll do an in-depth look at the tools I use today. In fact, I'll even show you 8 tools specifically which have significantly increased my joy of building Tamiya kits. Now, this video is geared towards the beginner and novice builder, and why, if you choose to use the same tools, you will enjoy building your Tamiya kits even more. Now, please note that I have no affiliation with any of the companies or items shown in this video. They're simply the best tools that I have found for building a Tamiya kit, and all can be found online or at your local hobby shop. Now, before I dive into the tools, let me take you back to the golden age of RC. Ah, yes. It was February of 1988 when I picked up my very first radio control car action magazine. I was 15 years old, and the lunchbox at the time was my vehicle of choice. I was excited to read all about it. Back then, a lot of the pages were ads for the different hobby stores around the country. And the more I looked at this magazine, the more my mind started to wander. And soon I found the Blackfoot stood out a mile over the lunchbox. Originally, the lunchbox was my vehicle of choice, as I've said, and the review in this magazine was absolutely awesome. However, when I discovered that the lunchbox was 1/12 scale and the Blackfoot was 1/10 scale, well, for me, if I was going to be using my hard-earned, saved money to buy one of these kits, I wanted the biggest, baddest thing I could afford. So the Blackfoot won out over the lunchbox. In this very magazine, I read about radios, batteries, chargers, compared prices from all the different ads in this magazine, and in the end, on a family trip to California, I walked into the very store I saw in this magazine, a Hobby Shack, and left with everything I needed to build my new Tamiya Blackfoot. I bought the Blackfoot that was on sale for $89.99. I bought the Leisure NiCad charger, $24.99. The Futaba Attack FP2NBR radio, which back then radios actually came with 2 servos. There were no such thing as ESCs. And of course, the Tamiya 7.2 volt hump pack battery, which fit nicely into the ORV Blackfoot chassis. I was all set. But was I? Back in the 80s, life was different. Living in a small town where going to the city was a big thing, this magazine was my only source of information. Now, with all my mentioned purchases, do you see anything missing from that list? Maybe let's do another quick look through the magazine, shall we? Do you see it? Can you tell me what I'm looking for here? Well, I've made a note of 2 places in this magazine where I'll show you. Tools. Of all my purchases, the one thing that was missing were the right tools. And just so you know, these tools are not the right tools for building a Tamiya kit. But we'll get to that in a moment. Now today, it's almost impossible to not be informed, as you can search for just about anything because of the internet. And when you search for something or buy something, the internet suggests other items that you might need to go along with your purchase. So if you're on a hobby store website and you, let's say, oh, I don't know, add a Tamiya Blackfoot to your cart. Seconds later, the website will usually come up saying, those that bought this item also bought these items. So let's once again go back to 1988. I'm now home from our family trip. I'm excited to start building my Tamiya Blackfoot. I dive into the manual to see what I'm going to need to build the kit, and discover I have everything that I need. Large Phillips head screwdriver, small Phillips head screwdriver, tweezers, pliers, modeling knife, scissors, and plastic cement. Now the side cutters, well, I don't have those, but I'll be able to make do with the modeling knife. And since I used to build 1/24th scale car models, I don't have the Tamiya cement, but I do have my tube of tester cement. That'll do, I'm sure. Okay, I'm all set. Let's pull all these items together and get started on the build. So here is the exact screwdriver I used to build my Tamiya Blackfoot back in 1988. It's my dad's 12-bit driver with all sorts of different heads and 2 Phillips head bits. This is also the exact small screwdriver set that I used back then as well, which were also Phillips head, which were great for some of the smaller screws. This is a Tester's modeling knife, which I used back then. Now they never changed the design, so I've always bought the same one. So this is a newer one, but it's the same. So I've always just bought a new one when needed. The only additional item that I have is this, which my dad made me because of a pit tip that was in this very radio control car action magazine. NiCad batteries had to be fully discharged before you could charge them up again, and a reader submitted a tip where if you used an automotive light bulb attached to a Tamiya male connector, you could drain the battery fully. And once the bulb was fully dead, you knew it was okay to charge the battery again. So Rick Poon from Huntington Beach, California, thanks for the long-lasting tip. So it was time to get started on the build. And you know what? The build was not that easy to do. This screwdriver would work great until the screw was almost at the end, and then the screwdriver would start to slip out. And the only way that you could keep it in from, not coming out was to put a lot more pressure on the screwdriver as you turned it in. Now, it wouldn't happen all the time, but the screws always seemed to be tough to get in, or out for that matter, and you'd be worried about stripping the screw or wearing out the screwdriver. There were times when I had to use pliers to remove the screws because I had in fact stripped them. So you'd be using these to try and pull them out and be able to put in another one. But you know what? At 15, you didn't really know any different, so this screwdriver was, in my mind, the correct tool. So I'd just keep going. Now, as I was a 1/24 scale model builder before I was introduced to the world of RC, I was using my Tester's model knife to remove parts from the parts tree. For the Blackfoot, the parts trees were made of thicker plastic, but I never gave it another thought to use anything else other than the same Tester's model knife to remove the parts I needed for each step. It might have been a little tougher to do, but it still did the trick. And in the end, I finished my Blackfoot with these very tools, and it lasted me for years until I finally sold it to buy another one. I have so many great memories of that truck, and by the time I got rid of it, the tires were almost bald and the trailing arms sat like this from wear and tear because back then I couldn't afford bearings, so the moving parts wore out faster. The 80s truly were the golden age of RC. Now since that time, I've owned a Kyosho Ultima, then sold it for a Tamiya Nissan King Cab, kept the King Cab, bought a Tamiya Jeep Wrangler on the CC01, and then got a Tamiya Gazoo Racing TRD 86 on the TT02 chassis, my first TT02. And you know what? All of these kits were built with regular Phillips head screwdrivers, and I was always constantly aware that I had to be careful or I would strip out the screws. But then, in 2016, when the Blackfoot was re-released, I absolutely had to get this kit again and relive the memories of building my very first Tamiya. But the one thing I did differently, I decided to buy the Tamiya RC tool set, because when I was buying this kit online, once I added this to the cart, it was recommended as a what others bought with this purchase. After all, I remember the issues I had with the screws in my original Blackfoot, so maybe this set would make all the difference. And it did, in a big way. Because what I found out doing more and more research was that Tamiya doesn't use Phillips head screws. They use JIS, Japanese Industry Standard screws. And the Tamiya RC tool set is a JIS screwdriver set. No wonder I was having so much trouble. All these years of thinking that a Tamiya kit used Phillips screws when in fact they used JIS. But here's the thing. Unless you were really to dive in and find out what screws Tamiya kits use, you might still think that they're Phillips head today. Why? Because the manuals don't mention JIS, and even the Tamiya USA website doesn't mention that they're JIS screwdrivers. And depending on the hobby shop, let's use A-Main for example, they are still calling these Phillips screwdrivers, not JIS. So no wonder people are confused, because yes, there is a difference, a big difference between Phillips and JIS. Phillips head screwdrivers have a much wider head on them, and JIS are more narrow. So if you use a Phillips head screwdriver in a JIS screw, the screwdriver head isn't fitting properly into the screw, which means that the screwdriver will spin out of the screw when the screw starts to get tight, which also means you can strip the screw. Mouthful. Now I know why I was having so many issues at 15 with my Blackfoot. So obviously for me, things have changed since 2016. It's now 2025, and I've been running a YouTube channel for 5 years now, devoted to building Tamiya kits and helping those along the way with their builds. Now, since starting this channel, I've ended up accumulating a few tools along the way that have really helped me with my builds. So as the question of tools keeps coming up, I'd like to show you what tools I use. Now, I know there may be other tools out there over and above what I'm about to show you, but these are the tools that I currently use, and I would 100% recommend them to anyone who is getting started in this hobby. And in fact, if you don't buy anything else, the first 2 tools I'm going to show you will literally make your life so much easier. And for fun, I'm going to show you these tools in the order in which you would probably use them when following a Tamiya manual. Okay, number 1, side cutters. One of the first things you're probably going to do in step 1 or 2 is pull some parts together to start the build. For the longest time, I was just using what I used when I built 1/24 scale models, my tester's knife. But when I started this channel and I was building more and more kits, I wanted something a little better. And honestly, I can't believe I didn't get a pair of these sooner. What a difference. Here you can see that you can get a much cleaner cut, and then you can use them afterwards to clean up the area. So for any build you're doing, these are going to make your life that much easier. Number 2, the Tamiya RC tool set. Now normally I wouldn't specifically recommend any one brand of tools for building a kit, but here's where I'll make an exception. As mentioned earlier, all Tamiya kits are made with JIS screws, Japanese Industry Standard, so save yourself the hassle and frustration of trying to use a Phillips head screwdriver and get yourself the right screwdrivers for the job. This kit is perfect, as it not only comes with 2 sizes of JIS drivers, but it also comes with 1 large flathead screwdriver, 2 box wrench drivers, 1 size is perfect for wheel nuts, 2 hex wrench drivers for cap screws, and 1 very small hex wrench driver for use with grub screws for putting pinions onto motors. In the case of the new BBX on the BB01 chassis, which I just finished building, most of the hardware used in that kit are hex cap screws, so this RC tool set was perfect for that build as well. Now, one thing to make note, I've actually never used the small hex wrench for grub screws. For me, I prefer the feel of the Allen key included in all Tamiya kits for that job, because over the years, I've kind of developed a sixth sense, you could say, of just how tight the grub screw needs to be. And I've never had a grub screw come loose on me yet, so I just prefer to use the Allen key in the kit. Now, one very cool thing about the Tamiya tool set is that not only do you get all the different tools, you also get this great grip that gives you a firmer hold on the screwdrivers and can be added or removed with ease. But they've also designed it so you can change the position of the screwdriver, giving you even more leverage if you need to really tighten something down, or remove a tough screw that doesn't want to come out. Number 3, needle nose pliers. Now I find these are great for removing the protective rubber tube off the motor when you get to that step. And depending on the shocks that come in the kit, these are required as per the manual. However, I've gone a different way now, which leads me to number 4, shock pliers. Obviously in the past, I was using the needle nose pliers when it came to building shocks, but depending on how much pressure you use to hold the pliers, I would find that even with putting something between the shock shaft and the pliers, the shaft would sometimes get marked or scratched. And with oil-filled shocks in particular, you really don't want to damage the shaft as it could create oil leaks. Now, these have been amazing. I'm even using them for steering arms and connectors as they just work incredibly well and give you something firm to hold when attaching the steering connectors. So those are the 4 tools that I use on a consistent basis and firmly believe that if you are a beginner or novice, these tools will greatly enhance the joy and ease of building your Tamiya kit. But we're not finished yet. Depending on the Tamiya kit you buy, you're going to find that some kits come with hard bodies and other kits come with polycarbonate bodies. The polycarbonate bodies come as a clear shell that isn't even cut out of the mold. So these require you to do a lot more work in order to prepare them for the painting and the finishing touches such as lights, bumpers, decals, which are all added on afterwards. So as I was starting to work on these types of bodies more and more, I wanted to find tools that would make my life a lot easier. So here are the 4 tools I now use for cutting and preparing a polycarbonate body for paint and final touches. 1. A body reamer. This is an awesome tool. The first thing you have to do when you start working on a polycarbonate body is put the holes into the shell where the body mount posts will go, as well as the holes needed for any of the different pieces that the body needs, bumpers, lights, mirrors, etc., which will all be put on after the painting process is finished. So this tool is incredibly sharp, but because of the markings on the end showing you the sizing, you can spin this through the polycarbonate and stop when you reach the correct size. I can't imagine doing another polycarbonate body any other way now. The body reamer is a must-have tool. Number 2, a Sharpie. In order to cut the body out, I like to go around the edges of the cut lines with a Sharpie so you can actually see the line you're supposed to cut. This makes your job a lot easier to do, and you're not ruining anything because there's that plastic film over the whole thing. So it just makes it easier. Number 3, a finger knife. Now this one is a Fisker's fingertip detail knife, and I love it for scoring polycarbonate. The one thing I never liked about using an X-Acto knife is that if it slips, you could lose a finger or cut yourself pretty badly. But with this finger knife, the blade can't slip out of your hand because your finger is literally locked into the handle. All of this means is that you can be sure that the knife won't slip out of your hand and you can get a really nice cut line in the polycarbonate. Number 4, polycarbonate scissors. I suppose you could use regular scissors, I know I did at first, but when you're cutting out body after body after body after body, you kind of want to be using the proper tools as they're going to work so much easier. This pair of polycarbonate scissors came as a kit, and as you can see, one pair is a straight cut and the other pair is a curved for going around corners or wheel wells. I find the curved pair is great for cleaning up the edges, and both pairs cut into polycarbonate very easily, so they are much better than regular scissors and will definitely give you a cleaner finish. Now, obviously from this point on, you have to paint the body. But as this video is about the tools, not the painting, I'll move on to the last step that requires tools, and of course the decals. So for the decals, I just use a good pair of scissors that are sharp enough to give a clean edge when cutting them out, and I also use a pair of tweezers to help place the decals, especially when there's some tight spots and your fingers are too big to fit. But as these items can be found in just about any home, they're not going to be on my official list of tools. So those are my top 4 tools for building a Tamiya kit. and my top 4 tools for working on a polycarbonate body that comes with your Tamiya kit. I will say that if you decide to get any or all of these tools for your next build, I'm sure you'll find the build process that much more enjoyable. Now, one last thing before I leave you to it, there's one more item you might want to pick up before getting started on your Tamiya build. But as it's not a tool per se, I'm treating this as a separate item altogether. Grease. Tamiya kits are notorious for including very small tubes of grease that are often not enough to get you through the build process, especially if you're someone who likes to use a lot of grease on their gears. And the last thing you want is to run out before you finish the build. So for me, I always have a spare tube of Tamiya Serra grease at my fingertips, just in case I run out of the kit included tubes. Now these tubes are pretty affordable, and as you can see, Serra grease works great on plastic and on metal parts, so I've found this to be an all-around great choice. And again, there are a lot of grease choices out there, but I've always preferred this one for my builds. So in summary, here again are my top 4 tool choices for building a Tamiya chassis and my 4 top tools for getting a polycarbonate body ready for painting and final touches. 1. Side cutters. 2. Tamiya RC tool set. 3. Needle nose pliers. And 4. Shock pliers. For the body, number 1. A body reamer. 2. A Sharpie. 3. A finger knife. And 4. Polycarbonate scissors. Now in the future, I might do another video on tools if I find more that I just can't live without. But until then, just remember that Tamiya uses JIS, Japanese Industry Standard screws in all of their kits, and the right tools for the job really do make a difference. Now back in 1988, I was making do with what I had, but today the right tools are literally only a click away. If I look back on those days, the right tools would have made a huge difference to my enjoyment of the build. But honestly, I don't think I would have had it any other way. The memories of that first build are just pure joy. And what's even cooler, I got to live and be a part of that golden age of RC. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful, and until next time, we'll see you in another video.